Hello, welcome to SME Futures. With me, we have a guest today, Mr. Patrick McSharry. He's a professor at Carnegie Mellon Africa campus and also the author of Big Data Revolution. So tell us about your book, The Big Data Revolution. How did it came about and what is your experiences around that?
One of the main reasons for writing The Big Data Revolution was that I realized that a lot of organizations, both in business and in government, were struggling to get their heads around the value of data. So lots of people were collecting data, but they weren't realizing the potential of that data. So the book essentially compares data to oil and the need to refine, process that asset so that it becomes intellectual property, and it's only when it's being consumed by people that it has real value. So the book provides a recipe in terms of the kind of steps that an organization might want to consider taking to be able to generate intellectual property from their data assets.
In fact, one of the industrialists in India, Mukesh Ambani, also used the same word, that data is the new oil, which is very interesting in the perspective. So in a layman's perspective, if we talk about what is big data, if I want to explain it to a layman.
So big data, I mean, there's lots of different ideas, definitions. I think a lot of scientists, especially physicists and engineers, feel that they've been looking at big data for decades. So some people get very insulted about the terminology big data. Maybe one way to try and clarify the distinction that it's not just about large volumes of data, it's also about the velocity of the data, so how frequently it can be measured. And then the final, and this is maybe the most important part, it's about the variety of the data, the fact that some of the data is completely unstructured. So if we think about data in Facebook or data in Twitter, those are essentially words, and you need to figure out how to turn those words into numbers before you can start analyzing that information. But I think it's also brought on a really interesting new goal for lots of organizations, and it's just to make better use of whatever data they have inside their organization, and to think about how to combine their internal data with external sources of data. That's where we are likely to find the most potential.
Considering the scenario world in today's world, how do you see big data? What role the big data plays in today's world?
So I think there's both the positive and the negative, or we can talk about both of those. I think one thing is big data is a buzzword. Buzzwords are helpful in the sense that it makes it easier for people to at least pigeonhole other people and to try and at least find experts in different areas. For a long time, I think big data has been associated with large organizations like Google, Facebook, Amazon, who need to collect that data and are using that data to run their organizations. There's also been a growing focus on big data being used for social good. So governments having open data policies, that data being released so that small organizations, academics can analyze the data, create new apps, create new products. So there's a lot of positive things that we're seeing in that space. I think more recently there's been growing concerns over privacy concerns, privacy risk, the fact that data could be harnessed to either sell you products that you don't really need, and maybe that's a large part of what many organizations are trying to do, but more to try and influence us and manipulate us in terms of swaying the direction that we might think about voting, for example.
Here you're referring to the recent scandal about Cambridge Analytics and its use of data for in social media, particularly to change the opinion of a voter.
Yeah, so I think politicians have always been a little bit liberal with how they view truth and facts. If someone turns up at your door and you know that they're not going to really tell you the truth, you can always close the door. I think what's more sinister about big data when it's combined with social media is that it's less obvious that someone might be trying to manipulate us. And so I think there's a lot of people who just don't have the time or the means to be able to do all the research that's required to figure out what the truth really is. So they are much easier to influence because with social media you can figure out who their peers are. And what we've seen with Cambridge Analytica is that we had 87 million profiles from Facebook being harvested to essentially derive profiles of many voters to figure out what exactly are the very short list of things that those voters are likely to be motivated by, and then to target those voters bit by bit over time. And that's when you start realizing that many of the elections, the US presidential election, the vote on Brexit in the UK, it's a very thin margin, and it's totally possible to sway people in doing that. And I think what's happening right now is we're seeing some very interesting legal battles over what exactly happened in those elections. It's a really interesting space trying to figure out, has this data analysis done something that's, first of all, has never been done before? What does that mean for democracy? And how are we going to potentially adjust systems and processes in the future? So how are regulators going to deal with this? How are voters going to figure out whether what they're receiving through social media is in fact the truth?
You have been of the opinion that data can be used for useful purposes also, including digital financial inclusion. Tell us more about your experience in that space.
So, and it's exactly the reason that I'm here in India at the moment, first digital financial services workshop. Incredible range of different practitioners from different banking institutions. Essentially, I guess the key element in all of this is the customer, and it means that we're looking at people analytics. We're trying to figure out what kind of advice we can give to customers, trying to figure out how to build profiles of customers, how to target the right kind of customers. So kind of questions there are understanding dropout rates, trying to figure out what causes stress in portfolios where you have lots of loans, and then trying to reduce default. So analytics there gives us the ability to figure out what kind of customers we should be targeting, and of course this lends itself very naturally to financial inclusion and making sure that we're using the data to the best of our ability.
What is the legal aspect of data globally? Who owns this data? There's already a court in Supreme Court of India going around on the privacy of data. Who owns? What is the legal framework to accommodate both what a company wants and what a consumer wants? How are we working in that space?
When you write a tweet and you send that tweet into cyberspace, essentially that tweet belongs to you. So if you've stated a preference for a particular product, that information is yours. If an organization were to then take that tweet and use it to target you in a way, they're using information that belongs to you. So they should really contact you first and ask you if you're okay with them doing that. We know that lots of marketing agencies are using data that belongs to us. So very much a lot of organizations are operating in this grey zone because regulators haven't quite caught up with the many concerns that people have around data. I think a lot of marketing is pretty harmless. I think we'd all prefer to find adverts that are actually targeting us with things that we really want. Some people get quite freaked out about that. They see that's a sinister side of things. I think it's still an awful lot better than getting information about products that you've already bought or products that you would never want to buy. It's kind of when it goes a little bit further, and when our profiles and the information that we're emitting wherever we're doing that, through Google, through Facebook, through Twitter, all of that social media information can be tapped on, can be harvested, and can then be used to allow different organizations, some of them to do things that we really wouldn't want them to do, and it's when we go across that boundary that we need to stop and ask lots more questions. And this is where regulators and government really need to step up the process and to try and make sure that they protect the citizens of many different countries around the world.